Hello, how are you doing? Today is our weekly coaching video, and I'm going to be talking about some of the things that people are doing at the moment to make some progress. Because on Monday, when I do my check-ins, there was just a really remarkable day where every single check-in that I read was positive. Everybody had made some progress on one level, and it was just really fantastic. And I quite often look at these check-ins to sort of see what the things that people are struggling with. So I can sort of bring that into these sessions and maybe just sort of go into things in a little bit more depth, knowing that, if one person struggles with something, we tend to all struggle with, similar things. But today I'm just going to flip that because what I wanted to do was talk about some of the things that are really making a difference for people's progress. And I also want to qualify what progress means as well before I go into that, because there's a lot of different metrics that we can measure for progress, and everyone's at different stages of the journey. So the progress they're making is in relation to where they are. And I suppose in a roundabout kind of way, I'm trying to say that progress isn't only on the scales. Progress, that is an important metric for a lot of people. I know a lot of people want to either be losing weight or knowing how to maintain their weight long term. But there's other things from a progress point of view as well, in terms of mindset, just being really clear and being really focused on what you're doing, making progress in the gym with strength, with fitness, with confidence. So there's progress in so many levels. And so what I'm going to do today is just sort of dig into some of the things that are really moving the dial for people and just talk about those in a little bit more detail. So I've got my list here, if you can see my eyes drifting. I have to have a list to keep me on to keep me focused. Talking of which, so the first one that I've written down is really seeing a big shift in people being really hyper focused on planning and more about making it happen than tinkering around the edges. It's really about getting down to the basics of being organized. And that very specifically means planning in advance to make it happen, to make how you want to eat, to make the frequency that you want to exercise at happen. And one of the reasons that I set up Slowvember was about giving yourself time to plan properly and to really think about your week. Very few of us have got straightforward lives. We've got complex lives. We've got things that we've got to juggle. We might have sort of quite differing routines from one week to the next. So there's never any sort of rhythm. We're having to sort of constantly adapt. But actually giving yourself time is really key to help you really sort of go into planning and get into the detail of it rather than, going further than just having a vague idea about what your meal plan would be, but thinking about how you're going to navigate weekends, how you might be navigating some travel or a work trip or meals around, if you've got lots of things with kids dropping off, picking up, how you're going to eat what you want and, do all the things that you've got to do in the evening without being starving. How we're going to plan events. That's a big thing from a coming up to Christmas that we're going to be mindful of. And one of the things that I just wanted to say that I forgot to mention when I talk about progress, a big thing about progress is having peace of mind and being happy that you're doing what you need to do, that you're feeling and acting in control. Because that's really a huge metric that I really look at with people. Do we feel happy with what we're doing? You could be never eating anything nice and losing weight at a ridiculous rate, but bored out of your brains and really feeling boring and feeling like you're missing out on stuff. That's not a good place to be. That's not sustainable. It's really about being able to find the middle ground to the point where you're happy with the choices that you're making and you're happy that you're eating in accordance with your goals and how you want to. And planning has a massive, massive role about in to play in that. And the most successful people are doing that, And and ironically, sometimes you think we don't have time for these things or our life's too complicated. Well, actually, the busier and the more stressful your life is, the more this will save you. And one of the things that people are really starting to focus on as well when it comes down to the planning and the detail is putting the spotlight onto their particular weaknesses. We've all got things we find easy. We've all got things that trip us up time and time again. No one's immune from that. And rather than doing the things that we're good at over and over again, like eating meals, eating healthy meals for our main meals, nearly everyone is fine on that score. There's very little to improve. It's about putting the spotlight on the things that trip us up, like snacking, like alcohol, like weekends, So, and that's where the planning can help you because you can really start to drill into these things that are undermining your progress. And that's something that, again, I am seeing people really being okay or not okay, that's the wrong word. Really sort of seeing that that's what they put where they want to put the focus on. Being confident to say, okay, my meals are great. I don't even need to have any conversations with you anymore about what I'm having for my breakfast, lunch, and dinner because I eat healthy. It's fine. I want to start talking about this because this is the bit that undoes me. And so I'm going to go into those in a little bit detail and give you some idea of some of the things that people are doing. So the first one is snacking because that's a really common thing. As I say, we can very easily be able to make decent meals and get into a good habit with that. But the snacking is the thing that we can just get wrong. Now, there's lots of reasons for snacking. There can be things like not eating well enough. So I'm going to assume really that it's just about the habit of wanting to have something nice for whatever reason, because well, sleep speaks for itself, doesn't it? We all want to be able to eat nice things. But I think what's very hard to do is to actually get that balance right. And something that is working very well for a number of you is looking at the common snacks that your go-tos would be throughout the week. And really, we all have a short list of things that we would tend to rely on in that respect. And what I've asked people to do is to look at those things and then go and work out what the calories of them are. It's not necessarily going back to calorie counting for those of you who really don't want to do that. But what it's about, it's being really honest and transparent with ourselves about what we're actually having outside of our main meals. So, for example, if your list of sort of go-to snacks might be a piece of toast or a couple of biscuits or a little chocolate bar or, whatever your thing is, it's about working out what that is, going online and having a look at how many calories that have got in it or estimating it if you can. So, if your thing's like a shop bought cake from a coffee shop that you don't necessarily know, having an idea and starting to build up a tally of what that does, what that adds up to. And what you start to see then is you start to see the reality of how much you're having and able to be more objective about evaluating, am I going too far here? Am I kidding myself that I'm not having as much as I want? Or that every time I have something, I'm saying, I'm fine with this because I want to be able to eat snacks. I'm happy to have a biscuit in the afternoon because I enjoy it, and that's part of why I'm here. I want to be able to have these nice things. We can talk ourselves into that too often. And when we start to sort of write this list about what we're having and what that's adding up to, it can then start to inform us about what would be a better system, what would be a better amount to have. And rather than then eating throughout the day or throughout the week and thinking, yeah, this is okay, this doesn't count, and kidding ourselves and then being frustrated when you get to Sunday and you do the check-in and nothing's changed or gone in the wrong direction, you're able to then start almost creating this mental tally as you go along. And that can be really effective as a reality check. And what I'm seeing with that, it's not that I'm telling anybody to not snack, but the change that that's making is they're still snacking. So they don't feel deprived. They're still having food that they enjoy, but the weight loss has kicked in again and started. And it's not small amounts either, So it's very, very effective to look at that. Another thing that happens with snacking, which I just alluded to before, is when we decide in the moment, and this is really interesting because, and I've experienced this myself, and I've spoke to other people about it a few times as well, that you can be thinking, right, I don't want a snack, I don't want to eat stuff. And then you get to a certain point in the day and you then start to have this negotiation with yourself about, no, I do want to have that biscuit, I do want to have that chocolate because I don't want to be the sort of person who can't eat those things. And this is what it's all about, being able to have stuff as well and be okay with it. So I'll have it. Do you recognize that? But what happens with that is that we can't quite trust ourselves to decide in that moment because it backfires. Because if you think about it, these things happen where when we are in an environment or a situation where having something nice, for want of a better word, is an option to us. And we're always going to justify why we should. And what we're never going to sit there and say no. We're always going to talk ourselves into it. So just think back about that. Think about if you've been in any of those situations. How often have you talked yourself out of it? And how often have you talked yourself into it? This is the mistake that we all make, is deciding in the moment. A better strategy is to, again, it goes down to planning. It goes down to thinking about things, is to anticipate those situations and being clear about how we want to behave. So let's say you work somewhere where you've got like a staff room and there's chocolates in there because someone always brings in chocolates or cakes or what have you. And 3 o'clock comes in and they're there. And you're then in this situation where you're having this decision about do you, don't you? You don't want to be making that decision in the moment because we know what will happen. You want to be anticipating what you really want to happen in that situation. And when you're out of the situation or at that immediate moment, then you're better able to make a more rational decision about how you want to behave and how that aligns with your goals. That's how we want to approach it. And that's going to help to start to inform us about whether we've got this balance right. Because what we can't do, we can't, sadly, say yes all the time. That type of mindset is going to get us into trouble. And I say trouble because I really mean that. If we just say yes to everything that's on offer to us all of the time for forever, that's going to add up to a big change in weight that's going to impact our health further down the line. And so we have to be able to learn, not just trying to justify saying yes to ourselves all the time, when we can say no and when we should say no. That's a key thing. Another weakness that people have been really putting the spotlight on is drinking or alcohol. So again, this is going to become really, really relevant as we go towards Christmas. And alcohol's an interesting one because it's totally socially acceptable. Our partners might drink. It might be a really important part of our work culture or our environment or our networking. It's completely socially acceptable. Our friends probably drink. It's probably how we switch off and wind down from work. It can have a really big role in our lives, and it can be a really vital stress reliever in a funny kind of way. It can also become a source of stress because whilst we're going in the moment to alcohol because it's a lovely way to relax and unwind, and it's usually part of a nice social environment or leisure time, happiness, it's fun, all these things that are associated with alcohol. And lost my thread, talking too much. So we often, with alcohol, we always want to say yes, and we can want to say yes in the moment because it's part of our relaxation strategy, or it has so many benefits in that short term. But at the same time, we start to feel that we're going too far. And that can then, when we're not drinking, be a source of stress. It might be that every morning you're cross with yourself, or every Monday, after a few days over the weekend, you're cross with yourself, And one of the things that I just want to talk about with alcohol is that we can drink quite a lot of it and it's got completely empty calories. There's nothing in there that's nutritious or good for us at all. And I've got some just top line amounts. So one bottle of wine is 550 calories. A cocktail could be anywhere between 300 more if you're really going for, creamy stuff. Half a beer, half a lager is 100. So if you sort of start to do a little bit of a tally of what's not a ridiculous amount or unrealistic amount of alcohol, you could be 2, 3, 4,000 calories a week of alcohol, which is just empty nutrition. And the pressure that we put ourselves under then is we're trying to sort of pull back on the calories that we're getting from food to then give ourselves a little bit of calories in the bank to drink more with. So we're depriving ourselves of nutrition so we get these empty calories. And very often, because we're in a social setting when we drink and it relaxes us, it has, it has an effect of inhibiting us, so we would be more likely to maybe have the extra nicer meal, the extra course, and overeat, overindulge. If we've got a hangover and we don't sleep very well, we can be hungrier in the morning, hungrier the next day. And something that, funnily enough, one of my clients had sent me this week, and I was aware of this myself because a client had told me not so long ago about how their heart rate spikes when they've had a drink in the night. And if you do wear a tracker and you track your sleep, you will see that when I don't know, everyone's different, but your heart rate can really jump up overnight when you've had a certain amount of alcohol, which means that you're more stressed overnight because your body's having to work harder to get rid of the alcohol and you don't have as good a sleep. And then the next day you're on the back foot a bit, not just for the hangover aspect of it, but because you've not slept, you're not as well rested. And the other thing about alcohol is because whether we like it or whether you want to hear it or not, it's really poisonous, it's really toxic to our body. So when we drink, our body's priority is to get rid of the alcohol out of our system. And literally it prioritizes metabolizing the calories from alcohol over everything else. And that also means that it will stop fat burning because it's trying to burn off and metabolize the alcohol in our system. And that can take 2 or 3 days. So if you think you drink Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for example, that was I'll probably put Wednesday in there as well when I drank probably the odd Monday. You're not actually giving yourself many days where you then can actually fat burn because your body's playing catch up to try and detoxify the alcohol out of your system, as well as probably trying to cope with all these extra calories from the food side of the social occasion. So it can really throw a spanner in the works and really mess around with your ability to lose weight. So again, it goes down to planning. It goes down to thinking about, the first stage actually is awareness and being honesty and being able to say, and that's a huge step to take. So when you're at that stage and you're saying, okay, this is how much I'm having, this is probably what it's doing to me in terms of the calories, how it's impacting my weight goals, my health goals, how it might be impacting my stress levels. This is how much I'm having. Okay, I've got some good data. I've got some good information. I know it's important for me to start to bring that down. Okay, that's a huge step forward. Okay, because people can really just brush that under the carpet for years and years and years. Then it goes back down to planning again because you start to need to have little strategies up your sleeve to help you manage the sort of social events that you're going to go to and how you're going to drink or not drink. Okay, and that's really key. And I'm going to sort of link this into eating out as well, because there's a strategy here that can be really useful that, again, a few of you are using, which, again, I just want to highlight because they sort of, it goes together, drinking alcohol with socializing. So again, if we've got a big, busy social life, we've got, a couple of nights out at the weekend, or we can have multiple meals out at the weekend if we count lunches and dinners and things like that. And again, we'll go into this at Christmas. We have to think about how we're going to manage all these things rather than turning up to every single event and going with what we feel like, which will always be making the most of the situation, saying yes to everything. And the truth is that when we're in these environments anyway, we are under pressure from either the people that we're with to drink, or there's a social expectation for that we'll partake in it. So we have to be organized and prepared and have a plan and have a strategy. So let's look at these two things together. So one of the things that's really helpful is to have a hierarchy of what's worth it. So we're grading events based on how special, how important they are to us, and therefore when we should be prepared to indulge and really have anything that we want without an even modicum of guilt. Okay. There's just not work. It's just not there. This life is important. Celebration's important. Nights out are important. There's times where we don't have to worry at all or think anything other than being in the moment and saying yes. There are other times, though, where really we have to say, well, this event's not as important as that event that I've got on Saturday. So tonight I'm going to drive. I'm just going to have one course. I'll save myself for the weekend. And that's how we're trying to think about it. And there's probably sort of just tiers underneath. One client on the group had an 80th for one of her close relation. Well, that's a huge celebration. That's not the time to turn up and say no and feel guilty about your food. Christmas Day is another one. I am going to be having my 5-course Christmas dinner. My only strategy for Christmas dinner is to make sure I've got enough room for the dessert, because that's my favourite part. So I will only eat less of those other courses so that I can fully eat all the dessert. So that's my strategy for Christmas Day. But Christmas Day is another time where we should be saying yes all the time. So we start to think about how we grade these things, about what's worth it. And then we sort of plan our behaviors and our strategies for the events that are lower down the pecking order, where we're happy to go, where we want to go, where we'll get pleasure out of socializing and being with people and dressing up. But we don't need to eat and drink a lot to have that good time. Okay. And that means planning up front, committing to what we're going to have, checking menus, being prepared. We might take low or no alcohol drinks with us to places. We might drive, so we can't drink, or have an explanation ready. If we can go to places where people can put us under a lot of pressure to drink, just anticipate that, have a plan. And, part of this is accepting the challenge of knowing that we have to change our behavior and not go to every social event with a yes mentality when it comes to accepting all the food and drink options. And we're just starting to change our perceptions about what a good time means and what a good balance is for our overall health, well-being, our mind. So that's how we think about, really zoning in on things that when it's our alcohol or our social lives or the frequency of our social lives that's tripping us up. And sort of a last thing to talk about, again, in terms of progress this week, has been just seeing some really interesting mindset shifts. And that's really good. That is really, really nice to see, because I think when we can start to reframe what makes us feel good, we can start to think about things in a completely different way. One lady was talking to me and she was saying, I've started to go, someone had come to her with some food, given her some food, and she was like, I don't want that. And it wasn't that she was having to be willpower. She just really thought about it for a minute and thought, do I want this? Is it going to make me feel better? Is that what I need right now? No, it isn't. And she pushed back. And she felt great after that, not because she had just turned down some food and saved calories, but more that she was listening to herself. And she was thinking about the bigger picture. What makes me feel good? Because what stops us from feeling good is when we get this sense that we're ruled by food. We can't say no. We go too far. We have regrets the next day. We feel bad. We sort of feel bloated and all these other things. What actually makes us feel good is being able to get that balance right, having good control, having an idea of how we want something to play out, and then being brave enough to make those things play out how we want, which means dodging the pressure that either the environment or other people can put on us. And that's something that I'm really starting to see come through a lot. And that is really nice. And, a part of that is about clarifying what's most important for us now and seeing beyond the most important thing for us is to have this hedonistic lifestyle where we just eat and drink all the time and we have what we want. We're sort of starting to see there's actually things that are more important than that, and we may be moving on a little bit from that phase. or, we're starting to take our health more seriously and, for whatever reason, or we know that that lifestyle is maybe sapping us of energy, giving us health problems now or further down the line. And we're starting to sort of be okay with the fact that what we want to do is changing. And that can be a bit of a shock, actually, because I mean, I remember myself, I just lived for a cocktail. I just lived for a rooftop bar. I just, wherever I went, I wanted to drink. And it felt a bit strange when I sort of started to feel I'm doing all this, but I'm not actually enjoying it as much as I used to, and starting to get a sense that I was ready for something else. And it's a bit of a weird thing because you just sort of take yourself by surprise a little bit. And then you're a little bit worried, does that mean I'm boring? Am I going to lose friends? Is it going to affect my relationship? I talked about this the other week, didn't I? Is it going to affect my relationship, my social life? Am I going to be bored? Am I going to feel left out? So it can sort of really challenge you. But really, we have to just listen to ourselves. And it's quite a nice thing for us to start to allow that to happen and start to get really clear on what actually matters now and not being frightened to lean into that. And, what sits right alongside that is being able to put our own needs at the center of our focus and making things happen for us. I think women can really struggle with this. I was going to say I don't like to generalize, but I'm just thinking, do I generalize all the time? I mean, if I compare women to men, tend to have no problem just putting themselves first, doing what they think, and never really thinking about other people. And I don't mean that in a horrible way. I more mean that they just don't have that emotional baggage or that heaviness that they have to almost weigh up every single decision they make. They just do it and don't think. Whereas we can be quite reticent about saying what we want. We want to make other people feel happy. We want to make other people feel comfortable. We might feed our families what the food that they want first, or want to just say blend in with the crowd when we're out. And it takes some real courage, actually, and some real strength of character to start to put our needs at the center of our focus and organizing things around what we want, and making that shift to our life. And when I see people starting to do that, I love that as well. I really love that, because that's not just about losing weight. I mean, that just brings so many other things to us when we can start to do that. If we can start to do that by setting boundaries to make sure we can exercise and to make sure that we eat the food that we know does us good, that's just the beginning. Because when we then start to think we can put ourselves first and nothing happens around us, then that opens the door for us to be able to do that for so many other things that can really help, enrich our lives, change how change how happy we feel, change how our goals and our ambitions and what we think is possible for ourselves. It's an incredible shift to make. And we can start to do that for the first time in a long time around our food and exercise first. And that's really powerful. And then I think the other mindset shift is starting to accept the compromises, getting past the idea that change will make our lives worse, and starting to think, actually, how things are now are, isn't as good as I think it is. And starting to see that change and a different mindset or a different approach that will give you different results can actually start to make your life better. And again, that's amazing. So starting to see those mindset shifts are huge. And I think the net effect of that leads into starting to maybe feel what really motivates you is less about what the number on the scale is telling you, but being driven by this feeling of being in control just of your own life. And that's done in a lovely way. Control can be quite a negative word, but being in control is almost like being in the driving seat of your life, where you're doing things on your terms that are moving your life in the direction that you want. And you're starting to get really tuned in to what moves you forward versus what holds you back. And you're really starting to build your sense of how to keep moving forward. And you're better at doing it, and the momentum starts to build up from there. And you're also starting to see how when you feel that sense of being in control, how good and how empowered that makes you feel where when you're on the back foot and when you're at the mercy of all the stress and the emotions and all the sort of chaos of life and you're just being pulled from pillar to post, that feels awful, you know. But we can, through a mindset shift, start to pull ourselves away from that emotional roller coaster and get back in the driving seat and start, you know, being in control of our own life. That's amazing. And that's what, again, really starts to galvanize some of these habits that I've talked about, and the discipline to actually do these things, because we start to really value that. And again, I am seeing this so much in the check-ins and the conversations that I'm having with people, and it's phenomenal. I love it. So thank you all for sharing it with me, and let's just keep going. And I just want to finish off with talking about how tips for getting more out of me, tips for getting more out of your time on this program. One of the best things is when we have a good relationship, when we trust each other, when we share as much appropriate information as we can. And specifically, that's, you know, the food journal, what you're eating, how you feel about that, what you're drinking, what, when you're struggling, what it is that's what you think, you know, you might know why you struggle with something, or sometimes you need some help to figure out why you've got a blockage in your mind. I can help you with that. Having extra accountability, you know, the program is set up in a certain way, just because it's the practicalities of me setting up a program that gives you a weekly check-in, that gives you a monthly catch-up. It's just easy for me to set in place when you start, and it just gives you some clear parameters to work towards. But there's always the option for extra accountability. You know, if there's something that you're really struggling with, that you just really need to get past a certain thing that's holding you back, then we can have extra ways of communicating in between those key milestones. There's a whole different raft of ways we can do that. We just have to have a conversation and work out what's the best thing for you. I've also started to see, to be doing more when we have like a catch up, like a face-to-face, more check-ins that are action-focused planning sessions where we're saying, okay, so you can't fit a workout in. And get your diary out. Let's go through what your week looks like. Let's go through what next week looks like. Let's just sort of work out, you know, how we make these things happen. And so we're not just talking, chewing the fat and talking about the general things. Sometimes that's what you need. You need to maybe get your head around your blockers. You need to just sort of talk about more general things. Other times what we need is to say, okay, enough of that. Now let's get into the action phase. Let's work out how you're going to do this week and next week, and we set a plan together. So that's how we can work together to make that happen and get you closer to your goals and get you close to this feeling of knowing what you want and being in control of your own life, which is the big goal at the end of the day. So that's it. That's all I'll leave it there. These are the key things that I'm seeing, the big changes, which I'm absolutely loving seeing. So just keep going. Well done, all of you. We'll get where we need to be, and we're all here to support each other. Have a lovely day, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now.